Welcome, everyone. We'll officially get started now. This class is Ruth versus Judges, a righteous revelation of literally inversions and lessons to live by with Rabbanit Jennifer Raskas. This class will explore how the book of Ruth encompasses a masterful and astonishing Tikkun, corrective, for the end of the book of Judges. Through comparative literary analysis of the words, actions, and themes in the books, we will see how Israelites successive revelations of Ruth's inner virtues serve as a redemptive act for the depravity and sin latent beneath the surface in Judges. The redemption helps transform the Israelites from a people in Judges who have no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. That's Judges 21:25. To a people who merit a new era of kingship through the union of Boaz and Ruth, leading to the birth of King David. The comparison between Ruth and Judges will be elevated through additional literary explorations between these books and other parts of Tanach. Our study will continue with righteous inspiration for living a life of integrity and virtue. Rabbanit Jennifer Raskas is the community scholar at Shir Chadash, hard to read Hebrew words in English for me, a synagogue and educational center in Jerusalem. She's also the co-founder of the Or Torah Stone International Halacha Scholars Program, as well as a member of the faculty at Midrashet Lindenbaum. She's on the leadership, teaching and coaching team for the Orthodox Leadership Project, and is a trained facilitator for Resetting the Table, which builds cultures of courageous dialogues across charged political differences. She previously served as the Washington, D.C. director at Shalom Hartman Institute of North America. She's a graduate of the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and she teaches classes widely on a variety of disciplines, including Hebrew literary approaches to reading in Tanach and leadership development. Her articles and Divrei Torah can be found in academic journals and in online Jewish learning forums. The sources will be shared on the screen, and I'm also going to post them in the chat. And with that, I'll turn this to you, Rabbanit Raskas.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Evie, for that really nice introduction. And hi, everyone. It is so great to be learning with you today, tonight, depending on where you are. I'm in Jerusalem right now, so it's evening, but I really appreciate everyone who is Zooming either in the evening or from the middle of your day. What we're going to hopefully do today is prepare a little bit for Shavuot by hopefully looking at Ruth in ways that will light up the page, literally, in ways that show some hidden features of Ruth that become much more visible and known when we compare it to the end of the book of Judges. Before we get any further, I want to thank the leadership of Drisha and Drisha's staff for inviting me today, Rabbi Dr. John Kelson, and Caleb Bloom and Michael Bernstein specifically were very helpful in this, and of course Evie as well. So thank you so much for the invitation. And as I mentioned, Sandra, to you for a brief second, I spent some time on the Upper West Side in Columbia University, and Drisha was right there. And it was so amazing to know that really a pioneering institution in women's scholarship was taking place right near me, and clearly it's grown worldwide in so many ways since then. So really great to be here, really great to be with all of you. And with that, I would love to begin. So I want to tell, at the risk of saying I'm going to tell a joke, I want to share a little bit of a joke with you before we get started, which is that there was once a woman who was watching the evening news, and she saw and heard, she heard specifically that there was a car going the wrong way on the highway that she knew her husband would be on at that very moment, because her husband, very predictably, every day took the same highway home at the same time. So hearing this, that there was a car going the wrong way, she decided to call her husband to give him a warning. So she calls him up and she says, "Steve, I have to warn you, just heard on the news, there's a car going the wrong way on the very highway you're on." To which Steve said, Oh no, it is so much worse than that. There is not one car, there are thousands of them. So obviously, Steve was the one going the wrong way. And I want to use that a little bit as a metaphor for what we're going to be looking at, specifically in Judges. And the metaphor will flip itself when we come to Megillat Ruth, to the book of Ruth. And that is that in Judges, you're going to see that there are Israelites who believe that they are going the right way. They believe so strongly that they are going the right way, that they are going to use terms and words like, we are praying to Hashem, we are blessing Hashem, we are blessing God, we are united as one. All these like beautiful terms, they're going to be using them to describe their actions. They really believe they're going the right way. But we are the ones that are going to be watching the evening news. We are going to be able to see very clearly that they are absolutely not going the right way. In fact, they are going the completely wrong way. So what I think is really interesting about that is that there's a difference between surface versus depth, right? On the surface, the way they talk about themselves in the book of Judges is going to be, we're so great. Look at all the amazing things we're doing. But we as readers know that there's a difference between surface and depth. And especially because we're going to be able to see the context of what is going on, we're as readers going to be able to read a very different story, which is that actually the context of what's going on, there's stealing, there's killing, there's a civil war, there's lots of very, very, very bad things going on. I think things that we would all say are not great. So that's what we're going to see, is that there's a difference between surface versus depth. And what we're going to see in a flip of that is that the story of Ruth is going to be the opposite, where Ruth, when she first appears on the scene, people wave her away as some woman from, right? Anyone remember where she's from? From Moab, right? From a Moabite woman. They're just going to dismiss her. Oh, her? Don't pay attention to her. She's just a girl from Moab. We can move on, right? But we're, again, as readers, we're going to be able to understand context, and we're going to see her actions and the way that she behaves. And we're going to realize that, again, there's a difference between surface, where people look at her on the surface and dismiss her, versus depth, versus seeing the beautiful, righteous person that she really is. And there's going to be a progression throughout the story where it's not just us that are going to see it, but Boaz, etc., etc. So does that sound like an okay journey for us to take? We're going to look at Judges, see surface, things are looking good, but depth, and then it's going to flip when it comes to Ruth. Are you ready to see that? Okay, and what I really hope is that the way that the righteousness and the ethics and the values that come out of the story of Ruth when we look at this, that they are something that you can take with you, not only for Shavuot, but really in the rest of your lives. The idea that it really is the depth of who you are as an individual and the depth of the actions that you take that matters. All right. So I see some text, so I'm just looking at them, but just to give us even more of an agenda of what we're going to be doing. First, we're going to answer the question of why are we even looking at these two stories together? I mean, why? Why didn't I pick any other two stories, right? Why these two stories? And then we're going to look at the way that these two books compare to themselves, compare to each other on three levels: the individual themes that happen in individual stories, the meta theme that we kind of just talked about of discovering Ruth and how that really is the antidote to what happens at the end of Judges. And then we're going to have a lot of fun because we're going to be able to go into the fine details where we're going to look at the words in the two books. And there are so many words that appear in both books and appear in fundamentally different ways. So it's going to be really fun, especially if you like or are interested or curious about literary analysis between two books, intertextuality, as they say. We're going to be doing a lot of that. And I'll explain, I believe the source sheets are, there's a link that's here, but I'm going to share screen and I'll explain the very colorful color code that we're going to have along the way. All right, any questions before we begin? Okay, not, I'm going to share screen. Amazing. Okay, let me know if for any reason the screen share is funky or you see your own faces when you're supposed to see the score sheet, etc. Okay, great. Okay, so here we go. So first of all, let's answer the question on everyone's mind, which is, why these two books? Why would we compare these two books to each other? And there's a very, very, very good answer. In fact, there's two very good answers. The first one is, look at the first 4 words in the book of Ruth. The first 4. Not even like, you don't even have to like finish breathing when you're opening the book. It's staring right at you. And those are Vayihi b'yamei shofet hashoftim, in the days when the judges were judging. So what are we learning immediately in the first 4 words? When does the book of Ruth take place? Take place at the exact same time as Judges. And scholars believe actually that the last 4 chapters of Judges, which are the ones we are specifically going to look at, the ones that appear after the individual judges, the ones that most of us have like skipped over when we were learning the stories of Judges when we were younger. So those 4 chapters, actually scholars believe they happen first. So in chronological order, we are going to be looking at the chronologically first 4 chapters of the chronology of Judges. And we're going to be doing it because it says right here, it literally is calling out to us, if you want to understand this book, what should you be looking at? The book of Shoftim. The other thing that's fascinating is that if you look at the individuals, the people in all the stories throughout these 4 chapters are going to be from 2 places. They're going to be from Beit Lechem Yehuda, right? Bethlehem in Judah. And they're going to be Ephratim. They're going to be from Ephrat, Ephratites of also Beit Lechem Yehuda, okay? So that's not only do we understand the time that it occurred, but we understand the place. And now let's look as an example. That was in Ruth. My color coding gets better as we go on. So that was in Ruth, that they were in Beit Lechem Yehuda and Ephratim. And now let's look at Judges. Look where they're from. They're from Har Ephraim, which sounds a lot like Ephratim. And there are commentators that believe that actually Ephratim might actually be referring to Ephraim. But either way, sounds very similar. And even more so, look at this. Beit Lechem Yehuda. So, and you'll see throughout the stories, this keeps coming back. So not only is it happening at the same time, but it's the same people who are going to be, or the same area of where the people come from that are in both places. And one more thing is that in the Talmud, in Bava Batra, Yud Daled Amud Bet, or 14b, where our sages list who they attribute the authorship of the different books in Tanach to. They attribute both Ruth and Shoftim, as well as Shmuel, to Shmuel Hanavi, which means that our sages believed that not only was it happening in the same time, not only was it happening in the same areas, but that both books were written by the same author. Okay, so now are we convinced that maybe we should start looking at these two together? Amazing. Okay, so let's continue on. So the first thing that I said we would do is we would look at individual stories that are happening in the book of Judges and see how on the surface everything is going great. But if you look literally like a millimeter under the surface, you start to see that not such good things were happening. And we're going to compare that to Ruth. And what's going to happen in Ruth is that the very themes that happen in Judges, that where things were not going so well right below the surface, they're going to come back fully righteous and fully good, whereas in Judges, they were not so. So this is my favorite story, and I'm just lucky that it happens to be the very beginning of Perek Yud Zayin of chapter 17, which is the very first chapter that we're going to look at together. I think in this one small paragraph, you can see so much about the society that the Israelites were living in the time of Judges. So let's read it together. Does anyone have any questions before I start? Okay, so here we go. Vayihi ish mahar Ephraim. So already we see again, right? One of the references to locations. We have a man from the hill country of Ephraim. Okay, his name is Michayahu, or in English they translate as Micah. Okay, Vayomer le'imo, he says to his mother, Aleph umea kasef asher lukach lach. Remember that money that was taken from you? Va'at alit v'gam amart be'ezni. Like, and you were cursing because you were so upset that someone had stolen your money, had taken your money. You even cursed it into my own ears. Notice past tense, right? He's referring to, in the past, I've heard you complain about it and be so angry about this money, right? Remember that money? Hinea kasef iti. I have it. I have the money. Why? Ani lakachtiv, because I took it. Now I want to ask all of you, anyone who can imagine themselves in a scenario where a child, an adult child it does seem like, but a child nonetheless, has come to you and said, I have your money that you were looking for, that you were so upset. I heard you all around the house, so upset about it. I know where it is because I am the one that took it. What would be your reaction to such a person? Especially if they're not a young child, but even so, what would you say? You can put it in the chat as long as I can see it. Oh, I see there's some things in the chat. Oh, perfect. Okay. Okay. Raise your hand if you would be happy with this person, with this, especially if it's your son right now, that he's saying, I know where the money is because I took it. Most of us would not be happy. We may have questions. We may be curious to know more. We also may be very, very, very angry, right? You knew I was missing it. You knew that I was upset about it. And only now you're coming to me and you're the one who took it, right? You can imagine all the different things that you might say. Let me know if this is something that you would have said. What does the mother say? That Tomer Imo, the mother says to him, Baruch bani Hashem. Blessed is my son to God. Now that makes no sense, right? So that's kind of what we're going to keep seeing, is that on the surface, they're talking in blessing language, right? They're talking in religious language. They're talking as if the interactions that they're having with each other are so pure, are so righteous, are so this is the beginning of the example, right? Where he does something bad and she said, blessed is my son to God. Let's keep going. So he returns the money to her. And the mother says right here, if you can see where I'm highlighting, V'tomer imo. What does the mom say now? Hekdash hekdashi et hakesef la'Hashem miadi libni. I am going to dedicate this money to God. Now, positive or negative, I'm going to dedicate the money to God. Sounds nice, right? That sounds nice. Give it to Zakah, maybe to the Mishkan, we Beit HaMikdash, etc., etc. Let's see what happens. What? La'asot pesel masecha. Now, this is literally, this one little paragraph has so many 10 Commandments 101 gone wrong, right? We have, let's see if we can list them. Kibud avayim, not doing, right? Like respecting your parents, not going so well. There's lo tinov, don't steal. That one didn't go so well. And there we have it. Don't make idols. What do we have here? And look at the language. She doesn't say, I'm going to make a pesel. She says, I am going to be hekdash hekdashji. I'm going to make something kadosh. I'm going to make something holy. I'm going to make something sacrosanct out of this money. What am I going to do? I'm going to make an idol. And that, again, is the surface versus depth that we were talking about. So then she does go ahead and give the kesef back. She gives it to a smith who makes an idol. And it says that Micha had a Beit Elokim, and he also had an ephod and a teraphim, and that he made one of his sons a Kohen. Now, what do we know about Micha? Where was he from? Is he a Kohen? No, he's from Har Ephraim. That's the first thing we learned about him, literally. Should Micha be going around having a house of God, having an ephod of his own, having his own Kohen? No, that is not what he should be doing. And then we have a refrain that's going to come up again and again and again throughout the stories, these stories specifically, which is B'yamim hahem ein melech b'Yisrael ish hayashar beinav yaseh. Right? In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone was doing what was right in their eyes. And that really is the explanation of what is going on. It's that there literally is nothing. There's no king that's uniting everyone and that's helping everyone understand what is right and what is wrong. and the consequence is that everyone is doing what is right in their eyes. I should not have said Beit HaMikdash before. That comes later. Just correcting myself. Okay, so now let's look at root and how this theme gets flipped. So if we call this, especially the Baruch Bani Hashem, the idea that the mother was blessing her son to God, right? But it wasn't actually for a good thing or in a good way. Look at the difference between Shoftim and Ruth. Let's look at Ruth. There are 4 examples in Ruth where people are blessing other people to God. It's like every time someone opens their mouth, the first thing they do is bless God. And the way that they do it is amazing, is beautiful, is nice, is really, really in line with the way that we would believe blessing should go. So Boaz comes to the people who are harvesting his field, the reapers, and he says to them, Hashem imachem, and they say back, Yivarach Hashem, right? The Lord be with you, and they say back, the Lord bless you. And if we look at the other examples, we have here Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law, saying Baruch Hula Hashem when she's talking about Boaz, blessed is he to God, right? We have her again blessing Ruth, Brucha at la Hashem, blessed are you to God in chapter 3. And then in chapter 4, we actually have all the women in who are around Naomi all saying Baruch Hashem, like blessed is God, God did not forget you. Because at the end, Naomi is going to Ruth's going to have a baby, and it's going to be as if Naomi had a baby, which we'll get to a little bit later. Okay, so that's the first example. Any questions? Okay, so let's look at a few more examples of themes that get inverted. So again, as the chapters of Judges continue, some of you may know the story of Pilegesh B'Givah, of the concubine of Givah. It's a very upsetting story, and I won't go into the most gruesome of details, so don't worry. If you're eating, you can continue eating your lunch or dinner. But let's just say it's a really sad story, and there's so many aspects of it that highlight, again, the depravity that was really going on in the time of Judges with the Israelites who lived there. And again, we see so many times where they think they're doing the right thing, but what they're doing is, to us as readers, not okay. So first, the story opens. We should not be surprised because this is the refrain throughout those chapters. In those days, Umelech in B'Yisrael, there was no king. And we already, because we've heard this before, we know that therefore everyone was doing what was right in their eyes. Now, what about our characters? Let's make sure they're from the same place. And here they are. So there is a man, and he is from Har Ephraim. And he takes for himself a concubine, a Pilegesh, and she is from Beit Lechem Yehuda. So right away, we have our setup. There's no king in Israel, and we have our characters who we are expecting to be from Har Ephraim and Beit Lechem Yehuda. So what happens to them? What happens to these characters? So it turns out that the concubine runs away. She runs away back to her father, and the man from Ephraim goes after her and spends some time in her father's house until he is traveling back with the concubine back to his house. And on the way, while they are traveling back, it becomes evident that they're going to need to find a place to sleep at night. They're not going to make it home on time. So first of all, watch this. So one of the lads that was traveling with him says, oh, we're close to Yevusi. We're close to the Jebusites. Why don't we stay there? And I want you to notice the word lean. Okay, the word lean is used in both stories, Judges and Ruth, as the place to stay for a night, right? Not to live, but to stay over. So what happens? Vayomer elav Adonav. So the master, the man, the main character of our story says, Lo nasir al ir nachri. I'm not going to go to a place where there are non-Israelites. So anyone can guess what the difference is between this story and Ruth? Who's your most famous non-Israelite who becomes someone that we, exalt in maybe all of the stories? I don't know. So it's Ruth, right? So we already can sort of see that this is going to be a different story than Ruth. So what happens is that he does end up finding a place to stay, and someone invites him in, right? but in what should remind us of the story of Lot, because it is extremely similar, the men, it says here, Anshe Bnei Belial, and it's translated here as a deprived lot, right? Come to the door, midafkim al hadelet, right? They're knocking on the door, and they say, send out your guest. Why? Because we want to nida'enu. We want to get to know him. Now, do you all think that what they need here is that they want to understand his favorite color? No, I don't think so. So in the Bible, we know that the word yada can also mean relations, right? So here, when they say we want to get to know him, they're talking about basically assaulting him in a not okay way, right? And what I didn't put in here because I wanted to save you from some of the negative visuals, but I'll tell you just a little bit verbally. What happens here is that the host says, wait, don't hurt my guest. Okay, the setup, so far that's a good thing. We have someone who's trying to defend a guest, right? Then he says, don't hurt my guest, take my daughter and my guest's concubine and do whatever you want to them, just don't hurt my guest. So we were doing so well. If only they would have said just the first sentence, don't hurt my guest, and then gone to sleep. Unfortunately, there was a second half of the sentence, and he says, take my daughter. Can you believe it? Take my daughter. And take the concubine, do what you want to them, just don't hurt my guest. And unfortunately, the man himself ends up actually pushing his own concubine outside, and they basically torture her throughout the night. And without going into all the details, he lets it be known that she has been tortured by these men. These men are from the Shevet of Binyamin, from the tribe of Benjamin. And basically, that becomes the reason why all the tribes of Israel start a civil war against the people of Benjamin. So we have an episode, we can call it hospitality, right? Hospitality gone wrong, or lean, right? That was our word, lean gone wrong. Now let's look at what happens in Ruth. There are so many times where the word lean is going to come back, and it is going to show something so much nicer, and really show caring and loyalty, and not any of the negative traits that we saw before. So let's look at it. So when Naomi ends up in Moab because there's a famine, and she goes with her husband and her two sons. By the way, her sons' names are Machlon and Kilion, which mean death and destruction. I hope she didn't actually name her sons that. I don't think she did, but I do think that the Megillah, the book, wants us to pay attention to names, right? They're telling you right away, names matter, names have meanings. Okay, that was a side point. So Naomi goes to Moab during a famine with her husband and with her two sons. The two sons marry Moabite women. And then while they're in Moab, her husband and her two sons die. So now she believes that she is all alone, and she tells her daughter-in-laws, you don't need to stay with me, right? I can't, even if I had a baby right now, it would be years until he would be old enough for you to marry. So really, you don't need to stay with me. You should go back. Orpha, one of the wives, does. And let's look at Ruth. Ruth says, but Tomar Ruth, al tifki ibi la'azbech. Please do not push me, right? Do not urge me to leave you. La'shuv ma'acharachat, ki el asher telchi elech, because everywhere that you walk, everywhere that you go, I will go. Uba asher talini alin, right? Anywhere where you stay, wherever you sleep, wherever you stay, that's where I want to be. And then a beautiful line, which should remind us of the blessings to God. Amecha ami, Elokai Elokai. Your people are my people. Your God is my God. So right now, when we have the word alin, right, lean, it comes back in such a beautiful way. It comes back as loyalty, as compassion, as kindness, right? None of what we saw before when there was episodes of lean, of overnight, that went very, very wrong. And in case you're not convinced yet, don't worry, there's another example. There's a whole incident, the incidents of the Goren, the incidents between Boaz and Ruth, where Boaz has showed Ruth kindness, and Naomi says, why don't you go to Boaz, who actually is a relative of ours, go to him at night. He'll be on the threshing floor, and through an interaction with him, hopefully he will decide that the two of you should get married, and all will be well. And we'll see actually why it's so important for them to get married in a second. So there's an episode that's happening overnight again. There's a woman who could be in danger, right? She could be in a place where a man might take advantage of her, may assault her. There's all types of things could happen that would remind us of Pilagish B'Giva. But let's see what happens when Ruth is in with Boaz, right? So Ruth is there, and Boaz says to her, BT, first of all, he refers to her as my daughter, a term of endearment. He says, Al tir'i, please do not fear, right? Do not fear. Kol asher tomri esalach, everything that you ask me to do, I will do. He's referencing, by the way, what Ruth said to Naomi, Kol asher tomri aseh. So he's repeating it. He said, whatever you want me to do, I will do. Why? Ki yodea, there's the Odea, by the way, but not, remember, we'll get to know him. Ki yodea kol sharani ki isha chayalat. Why am I going to be so nice to you? Because everybody knows what an amazing person, what a fine woman you are. So this is one of our examples of Boaz getting to know Ruth, right? What matters is who she is as a person. And really, in a moment where we could have had an awful night the way that we had in Judges, we see that Boaz is looking out for her. And not only will he not do her harm, but he said, I will do anything that you ask me to do. Please do not fear. And then he says to her, Lini, right? Stay, sleep tonight. And in the morning, I am going to perform an act of geula, of an act of redemption. I don't think it's an accident that we're using the word redemption when we're talking about redeeming a field. I'm going to perform this act, which I'll explain in a second. And through that act, I'm going to help you and your family. But I want you to go, b'terem yakir isha tre'ehu, before anyone will be able to recognize anyone else. Al yivadeh. So, I don't want it to be known that you came to me at night. And look at, he's doing that for her own reputation, right? For her own good. And think about the difference between Vinadenu, we want to get to know him, right? Talking about the terrible things they wanted to do to the guest, as opposed to Al Yivada. I don't want anyone to know. I want to protect you. I want to protect you from anything that would harm you, including anything that anyone would say about your reputation. So what do we think? Inversion? Okay. We're going to look at just two more, but they're connected. So you can sort of see it as one, which is brotherhood. So going back to Judges, we said that the whole incident with what happened with the Pilagish B'Giva, right, with the concubine, it spurred a civil war against Benjamin. It spurred a civil war of all of Israel against Benjamin. Now let's look at the language that is used in the Navi to describe the civil war. So first of all, I want you to notice that they call themselves, right? They presented themselves, it says here, they presented themselves as Am HaElokim, as an assembly of God. So again, we're using terms that would make us think that we're righteous and holy, etc., right? And I'm going to get back to this, but it's important to know that they were men who were drawing swords, okay, Anshe Cherev, and Sholech Cherev means to draw, but they were footmen. And I'm going to get back to that. I'm going to keep you in suspense. I'm not telling you right now why that's important, but try to remember that. Okay, so what happens? They also describe themselves as Ishachad. Now you tell me, what is ironic about fighting a civil war, so literally fighting against your brother, and declaring to everybody, we are rising to fight as if we are one. We're one man, all of Israel. What's ironic about that? They are not all men, one, because they are literally fighting against a piece of themselves. They are literally fighting a civil war. And we see that that's exactly opposite of what happens. I told you I would explain the redemption of the field. So Boaz is a relative, and he has an opportunity, if no closer relative, and in the story, no closer relative wants to do it, to redeem the field back into the family name. And he also decides to marry Ruth. And through doing that, through bringing the field back into the family, through the redemption of the field, Gulat Hasadeh, it's called. It says here that Boaz is lahakim shem hamet al nachlato, that he makes sure to bring back, right, the names that were lost on this piece of land because they passed away with no sons who were able to inherit it, no one in the family to inherit it. He's going to now take it and redeem the field back into the family. And what does it say here? The lo yikaret shem hamet me'im echav, because he doesn't want a name to be lost from within his brothers. So think of the term brothers. Think of what's happening in Judges, where they're literally, the brothers are fighting and killing each other, versus what's happening in Ruth, where Boaz comes and redeems the field with the word geula, right? With the word redemption, signaling to us as readers that geula is happening, right? Redemption on a high level, metaphorically, etc., 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 is happening. Why? Because he recognizes that we should never lose the name of one of our brothers. And the last part of this is the way at the very, very, very end that in both stories, there's a moment of, oh no, there may be a piece of the brotherhood that is lost. We just read it in Ruth, right? There was a worry that the family name, that the names of Elimelech and Machlon and Kilion, the names of Naomi's family may be forgotten, and we see Boaz redeeming it. Let's look at how the same exact worry of losing a part of Israel, right? Let's see how that worry plays out in Judges. So you've now been following it. Do you think this is going to be a story of values and ethics and morals that we can all be proud of? Or do you think this is going to be something that is going to use surface level terms that are good, but it's going to be full of depravity? What would you guess? One or two? I think most of you are guessing two. Exactly. I see some twos being raised. Okay, let's see what happens. So civil war happened. Lots of Benjamites were killed. Very, 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 very sad. And all of a sudden, the other 11 tribes wake up and they say, oh no, wait a second, we might lose a shevet. We may lose a tribe. What were we thinking? We might lose a tribe of Israel. And then there would be 11 and not 12. And it would be because we killed all the men and now the women have nobody to marry. So what are they going to do? There's a big problem because you might think, why don't they just marry the women of Benjamin? There's a problem. Problem is that before the war, they all went to a swearing ceremony and swore that they would never marry a Benjamite. That was part of their going to war. We are not going to marry them. And now all of a sudden they're worried that we did do that swearing thing, and now we might lose a tribe. So let's see. So they said, right, we went to Mitzpah, and we said, Ish mimenu lo yiten bito leBinyamin leisha. We did swear that we would never give one of our own to Benjamin. And they raised their voice, vayasu kulam vayivchu bechi gadol, and they started crying. Oh no, right? And they said, Vayomer lama Hashem Elokei Yisrael, right? Why has this happened, God? Lipaket hayom Yisrael shevet echad. Why is this happening, God, that we're going to lose a shevet? As if who had nothing to do with it? All of them who just fought this massive civil war. So what happens? They realize there's a solution. There was one group of people, the people of Yavesh Gilad, who did not come to the swearing ceremony. At the time, we might have been a little annoyed. Why aren't they here? But turns out it was good that they were there because they can marry the Benjamites. Okay, so what happens? They now want they want the people of Yavesh Gilad to marry the people of Benjamites. So we can imagine some nice ways to make that happen. Maybe they should go to some hotel lobbies. They should have some coffee. They should talk about their backgrounds, right? There's lots of ways that we could, I mean, not actually, because there were no hotel lobbies as far as I know, but maybe, who knows? Not actually, But we could think of lots of ways that we can get the people of Yavesh Gilad to mix with the people of Binyamin. Unfortunately, we are too smart for this. We know who we are dealing with, and we know that it is not going to be that easy. So what happens? Right? They sent down 12,000 warriors, and they told the warriors to do the following. L'chu v'hikatem et Yavesh Gilad l'fi hacharev v'hanashim v'hataf. Go to the people of Yavesh Gilad and kill all of them, including the women and the children. But anyone who has never been married, right? Anyone who has not known a man carnally, we can save. And they are going to be the ones that we are going to be able to match with Binyamin. So, and then it gets even worse. They're like, but what if the fathers get upset? Well, we'll just like blame it on. Like, there's so many ways that this gets worse. But the bottom line is that in order to get members of Yavesh Gilad to marry members of Binyamin, the thing that they decide to do involves killing, and involves not only killing men, but also killing women and killing children. And then we compare that to when we had the redemption of the field with Ruth. It said, "V'zot lefamim b'Yisrael al ha'geula." This is how geula, short geula, like when they do small c, big C. So small g geula, the redemption of the field, but really big G geula. This is how redemption happens. L'kayem kol davar. And this is what happens. Shalaf ish na'alo v'natan l'ri'ehu. They do a ceremony that's called a yibum ceremony, where Boaz ends up taking a wife who was married to a member of his family who passed away, and he takes her as his own wife. So you see the difference between how did we save a people from not disappearing in Judges, right? There was killing involved. There was killing of children and women involved, terrible, and innocent men, etc. Whereas in Ruth, the way that redemption happens is through a peaceful ceremony that involves like a shoe. Now, why is the shoe important? So I want you to remember that back up here, we had the word shalaf as well. Do you see this? Shin lamed pei, or the word to draw. Now in Tanach, I'm just giving you a preview of the word thing. In Tanach, the words anshe cherev appears a lot, that there are men who fought with swords, but the only time that the men who are fighting with swords is ever described as raglei shalaf is right here. The only time that men fighting a war are described as footmen are here. Now the word shalaf is always about drawing a weapon, except here. When what's being drawn? A shoe, right? This is the only time in Tanakh that you have, the idea of shalaf, drawing, involved with feet. In one, it was the footmen, and here it's the redemption, the Yibum ceremony with the drawing of a shoe in a peaceful ceremony. And as we saw, the answer to the ceremony is that through that, there was Lahakim Shem Amet Anachlato, to bring back the name of he who deceased on his portion, Lo Yikaret Shem Hamet Mi'imachav, because we will never stand for the name of our brothers being lost from amidst our brotherhood. Okay, that was the individual themes. What we're going to do now, in a quicker pace, is we're going to look, you already know it because I've been talking about it, but we're going to look at the meta theme that takes place, the way that the whole idea of seeing Ruth for who she is, we're going to see it in the text, and we're going to be able to see how that is the Tikkun, right? The atonement or the corrective for what happened in Judges. And then we're going to have some fun looking at the words. So let's continue. So we have here, and does anyone have any questions before I jump ahead? Okay. So we have, yep, Sandra, do you have a question?
Yeah, I actually think it is quite important not to skip over the violation of what was done to the women in your when you're talking about the Judges story. I mean, other than the fact that, I mean, it's repulsive, but it's it's super important to say that they chopped her up. They chopped up the Pilegesh Begiva, the wife, the concubine of the man from Ephraim. They chopped her up into 12 pieces, and I mean, I think it's actually incorrect, if you pardon my expression, to skip over that, because then you've only highlighted the massacre of the tribe with 12,000 soldiers, and there's no counterpart to it. I mean, the fact that that the woman was chopped up by the people who should have protected her actually enhances your argument. So I think it's important for people to know, people who aren't necessarily familiar with the story of Pilegesh Begiva, to know exactly what happened and not to gloss over it, if you don't mind my saying that.
I appreciate that, and I definitely understand it. So let's honor what Sandra is saying. So I'll go back to the story. So we saw that he pushed his own concubine out the door, which I mean, he knew exactly what he was pushing her to, right? She is assaulted throughout the night. She basically faints on the threshold of the door. She can't even get back inside. He tries to wake her up. She can't wake up. And then he does, as Sandra said, when he gets back home, he cuts her up into 12 pieces and sends a piece of her to each of the tribes of Israel. And that's what infuriates everyone, that this is what Benjamin did. They literally have a piece of her to look at, and that's what starts the civil war. So it's grotesque in so many levels of awfulness. And as Sandra said, you're right. It's the person who should have been protecting her, because it's his concubine. And we do see that she had some inkling of this, which is awful. She ran away. She didn't want to be his concubine. She tried to run back to her father. And by the way, her father, whatever she told him about how horrible this man is, he didn't protect her either. So she was failed by multiple people. There were multiple, especially men throughout the story that did fail to protect her. And that now you all know the full story of what happened to her. So, and I think, Sandra, you're still on mute if you're trying to say something.
Yes, thank you. And that's why I want to point out, it so bolsters your argument of a Tikkun, because all of these men, multiples and thousands of them in the language of Judges, violated her and failed to protect her when they were charged with protecting her in that societal mode. And yet one single man in Israel, he protects Ruth. So, I mean, I think your argument is enormously bolstered by putting it right to everybody's face what actually happened, because Boaz single-handedly, no pun, was able to, but he didn't even need to raise his hand in with a sword, and he was able to protect her, and that's the, as you say, the gorgeousness of Megillat Ruth. So I think, going forward, just let's put it where it is. The grotesqueness happened and the awful violation occurred, and that makes Ruth's story so much more amazing.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
do appreciate that. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now let's see, with especially Sandra's really, really helpful emphasis and helping us to really see just how grotesque Judges was, let's see the opposite happening in Ruth. So if we look at the meta theme, and we'll just point out some of the major parts of it. So again, we talked about how names are really important, right? The sons are named Machlon and Kilion, death and destruction. Naami in English means pleasant, right? And she starts the whole book saying, stop calling me Naami. Don't call me pleasant. I'm embittered. A lot has happened to me. You need to call me bitterness. So we see that the way that we call people matters. And in the beginning of the story, Ruth is referred to. She's not even given a name. Lemiha Nahara Hazot. Who is this young woman, right? Oh, her? She's a Nahara Moavia. She is a Moabite girl. She doesn't even have a name. And that's what the reapers say to Boaz. Oh, don't listen. She's a Moabite girl. But Boaz sees who she really is, and he compares her. He uses language that even compares her to Abraham. No, this girl, she didn't go home. She didn't go back to her birthplace, right? Moladetech. She stayed with Naomi. I know what she did. And he gives her kindness and tells her that she can partake in many parts of his field, etc. And when he's being kind to her, she says to him, why are you being so kind to me that you lahakireni, that you recognize me. Like, she's like, you literally see who I am. How is it? How is that possible? Va'anochi nachriya. She uses the exact same word as we saw in Judges. Al tavo that you're nachari. Don't go to a place that doesn't have Israelites. She says, I'm not an Israelite. How do you recognize me, lahakiroti? And he says, why? Because I know kol asher asit. Because I know everything that you did. Right? Boaz sees beyond her surface as a Moabite woman and recognizes her for who she is. And if we keep going, we see that the story builds up upon Boaz was first, and Naomi is not even first. Naomi learns from Boaz. And as the story builds up, lots of people start, especially with the word hakir, to recognize, lots of people start recognizing who Ruth is. And we see here, her mother-in-law said, where did you get all this food when she comes back with food? And he says, Yehi mechirechecha baruch. He who recognized you, he who saw who you were should be blessed. And then we saw this line before that Boaz says to Ruth, I'll do whatever you want because everyone knows that you are an Eshet Chayil. Everyone knows what type of person you are, and that's why I'll be so nice to you. And then later in the story, this person who was dismissed as a Moabite girl gets tons of blessings. She gets blessings from the men of the city and blessings from the women of the city. And we see here one of the blessings is that Ukara Shem Beit Lechem, that she should have a name in Beit Lechem, the importance of names, and specifically that her house should be like Rachel and Leah. So that her house should be like our own matriarchs. So someone who we dismissed at the very beginning, towards the end, everyone does recognize who she is, and they recognize what a beautiful soul she has, and how loyal she's been, and how kind she's been to her mother-in-law, etc. And they bless her with not only recognition and with gratitude, but also with telling her, you are like our very own matriarchs. And the final moment is when the women say that look, Ruth marries Boaz and they have a baby, and they say, oh my goodness, you're going to have someone to sustain you, right? To give you food in your old age, your daughter-in-law who loves you, right? They recognize that she loves her. And why is it so important that she ends the book with someone who's going to feed her, right? How does the book start? Starts in a famine, and it goes full circle that by the end of it, she gets basically a new member of the family who is going to sustain her in her as she grows. So just to show you, I told you I promised you some fun words, so I just want to show you. We won't read the paragraph, but I'll just point to the words. Look at this. This is amazing. The words in the book of Shoftim, many of them were good words. They were naturally good words, just like the naturally good actions, blessing to God, right? Where we are fighting as one man. The words themselves are good words. There are words like davak, which we use to be cling to Hashem. There are words like menucha, which we consider as rest, right? There are words like chayil, right? We heard Sandra even said it, and that Boaz himself is described as chayil, right? The words in Judges like davak, menucha, chayil are good words. But when they're put in the context of Judges, where things go wrong, where the context is bad, they take on negative meanings. So the word davak in Judges actually becomes to pursue them in battle. They pursue them in battle. And menucha comes a place in the battle where they stop. And the Anshe Chayil are these soldiers who are committing these atrocities. And now look at Ruth, the words get back their natural goodness. Just like the values come back, the ethics come back, the morals come back, the words come back. We have menucha. It gets its original meaning of resting. It actually is also used to be manoach, to be a husband in this case. The word davak, which was over chase in battle, now becomes Ruth davkaba, right? Ruth clung to her. And the word chayil, which described the soldiers who were doing things that we don't think were right, comes back to both describe Boaz as a gibor chayil and to describe Ruth as an eshet chayil. And many of the negative words, so here's an example also in this purple one, many of the negative words that talk about the Civil War, especially with the destruction, come back in a lot less of a negative way throughout the story of Ruth as well. And we saw already the Yodea. We talked about that one. We talked about Shalaf before, etc. And now for the very last point, just to drive home that these two stories really are supposed to be read in tandem, is that the way that the book of Judges ends is we have this whole civil war happen. We finally save a tribe, but we save the tribe through killing and through lots of horrible things. And at the end of it, Ish l'shivto l'mishpachto, every man goes back to his own tribe, his own clan. Ish l'nachlato. Why? Here it is. This is our phrase. We expected it to be here. Because Biamim Hahem Ein Melech. There was no king in Israel. Ish Hayashar Beinav Yaseh. Everyone did what was right in his eyes. Compare that to the book of Ruth, where Ruth and Boaz have a baby, and we're given the lineage of what happens with that baby. The baby has a baby, etc. And from that baby, we get Boaz Holidet Obed, Obed Holidet Yishai, right? Boaz begot Obed, Obed then had Yishai, and Yishai Holid at David. We literally get from the end of this story, as opposed to Ein Melech B'Yisrael, we end the story with, we are ready to merit a king. And I think that's the message between them, is that it's only a society that is not going to be surface level, a society that is willing to look beyond the surface, a society that cares about actions, that cares about value and loyalty and compassion and kindness, that is going to be the society that is worthy of a king and worthy of moving forward. That's the society where the words are going to get back their original great meaning. That's the society where the Israelites are going to thrive. So I'm going to stop share. I hope you enjoyed. I hope that this is, again, a lesson that you can take not only with you to Shavuot, but also in the rest of our lives as well, that really what is inside matters, and what's inside can then be projected outside. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Rabbanit, Raskas, and thank you also to everyone who joined us today and is part of our Drisha learning here. Thank you so much for joining us today for this one session class. And just a reminder that Sfir Azman continues, and lehitraot.